start on my talk here, and as you guessed, it was about mission. So we've already been talking about mission, but I want to start with a welcome, and I want to welcome the members here, and I want to welcome members of the Ophthalmic Industry Fellowship as well, and their support. And you guys have been incredible, Bill, and the rest of the group here. So we really appreciate you guys joining us and making our family part of your family. So we represent ophthalmologists, we represent ophthalmic industry, we represent mission agencies here that are called by God to focus on our mission of eyes. I want to dedicate this talk really to a few of my role models and mentors that I've had over the years. And there's going to be a lot of people that I'm going to miss, but I'm in particular, I want to dedicate this specifically to Dr. Glenn Strauss, who's been a mentor and a role model for me, and Dr. Bert Bowden are two. And then I have many others. Baxter McLendon has been, and Brad Ferris. And I want to dedicate a special part of this talk to Dr. Lowell Guess, who just turned 98 in July. And I just got an email with him 2 days ago, so I'll share that a little bit. But what I'd like to know is, the society's in an exciting place right now. We are really becoming more missional in some ways, and we've been really working on this for a number of years. And I'm just thrilled, and I look out and I see faces of excitement, and I just I think we're encouraging each other in this journey that we've been on. I want to start in just ask the question: who is thinking, has never been on ophthalmic missions, but is interested in learning about them? And I would just stand up if you're somebody that's going, man, I want to get involved, but I don't know how to get involved, or I haven't done that yet. No one. One. All right, good. Two. But don't be shy. I want you to stand up, because we're going to have everybody stand up in a minute. So please stand up if you're interested in missions. You haven't really gotten involved. It's really important. So look around, guys, and see who these people are. All right, you can sit down. Now I want you to stand up if you've been involved in at least one short-term mission. So stand up if you've been involved in one short-term mission. Everybody has been. So look around. Holy scamoli. All right. Now, if you've been involved in a mission, mission more than 1 year. So sit down if you've only done one. But if you've done 2 years at least, and let's say you've done 4 weeks in the last 5 years, keep standing.
Talking about continuous?
Yeah, no, not continuous. 4 weeks, cumulative. Yep. All right, remain standing if you've been doing 10 years of missions. And how about remain standing if you've done 15 years of missions?
I don't know how to add that.
All right, 20 years of missions. Involved in 25 years, if you've been involved 25 years, keep standing. Now look around at who's standing, guys. This is a really neat thing. 30 years, anybody been involved in 30 years of missions? Wow. The Shanzers, right? And and you grew up on the mission field. That's no fair, right? All right, you guys can sit down. Now, if you've been a full-time missionary, I want you to stand up. Full-time missionary where you've lived overseas full-time. All right, very good. All right, so my point's well made, but I want you guys to look. So there's many mentors already here, many people to look up to, and maybe I can skip the rest of my talk, and we can just intermingle. My talk is really, I've got 6 things I want to talk about. I want to talk about definitions. I really want to talk about models of mission, and I hope this talk will be inspirational. We're trying to get it recorded for those that are going to want to look at the models that are out there for us. I want to talk about the risks and benefits. I'll tell a little bit my story, some principles, and then I'm going to end on Jonah. So really, the definitions that we want to start with really are questions that we're going to be trying to answer. What is mission? Where is my mission? And who's my mission to? Who's a missionary? What is a missionary? Where does a missionary have to go? Those are some of the things that we'll think about. And so what I was doing as I was preparing this, we've been asking these questions for a long time, and we've had an interesting dynamics on Wednesday of the annual meeting where we talk about all sorts of things. And I happened to pull this up just several days ago, and it was my notes on a meeting from Cincinnati, Ohio in 2010. Raise your hand if you were there in Cincinnati. Dave Cook? I thought he was here.
Yeah.
Oh, you got your hand up. Okay, good. All right, well, here's who spoke. It was Dr. Glenn Strauss and Dr. Brad Ferris. And this is a good place I wanted to start, because Dr. Strauss talked about the art and science of missions. And he said, he challenged us that passion is not enough. He said, is passion for the gospel enough to sustain you being involved in long haul for ophthalmic missions? He asked a really good question. And his answer was, I don't think passion is enough to sustain you. Passion for the gospel is not enough. And I thought it was a good way to start, and that started a very vigorous conversation. He said, you must have a calling. And in my notes, I actually have recorded people's responses. So the first response, Dr. Michael Seward looked up in Webster's. He said, the definition of a calling is vocation. Right, vocation. Dr. Steve Petty said, compassion's a start. There's got to be conviction, though. Dr. Steve Anderson, living in Indonesia at that time, said, the need is the call. We are called to serve the Lord. We need to pray what could be a very dangerous prayer, which is to pray for clarity from God. This is not a risk-free prayer. One must be ready to act. And Steve knows that very true, because he prayed that prayer and God called him to go to Indonesia for 5 years. One must be ready, and God gets us to the spot where we're free to respond. Brad always likes to throw gasoline on the fire, and he says, do you go and work and do good work? And have we done a disservice if we operate without sharing the gospel? Dr. Bill White chimed in, we need to share the gospel. Brian Huff from South Carolina, we need to share after a quality work has been done. Steve Anderson, we need to trust God for the outcome. In expanding the kingdom, Brad said, early on I didn't have time unless I'm sharing good news. But God has moved me. Sterling Cannon, the current president at that time, said, watching God expand his kingdom is one of the funnest things there is. And somebody quoted Elizabeth Elliot saying, it's not in your hands, the results are in God's hands. Glenn said, God's real purpose for his kingdom really is he's seeking worshipers, because the heavens declare his glory, but we're the ones that need to respond. And our highest calling really is to be worshipers and to recruit worshipers. We're tools to recruit worshipers. He said, what are we trying to measure? The measurement determines our priority. Whatever our measurement, what we're trying, that's what we should prioritize. And so he said, how do we measure success? He talked about hearing the gospel, showing the gospel, demonstrating God's love. And he said there's 3 tools for a missionary. And they're the gospel, surgical intervention, and medical education. Our guest speaker at that meeting in Cincinnati was Dr. Sam Molin, was the GHO director at the time, an oral maxillofacial surgeon. He said, no one comes to the Lord unless they are drawn to him. Evangelism not a point, but a journey, and the Lord does not call us to be successful, but he calls us to be faithful. Dr. David Cook said, we are responsible for the depth, but God is responsible for the breadth. I took pretty good notes, didn't I? I hadn't read this in 10 years, so I was excited. And this was our guest speaker. Oh, no, I'm sorry, no. She wasn't there, but we did quote her, greatness is found in doing little things. Now this year in Kansas City, we focused on Wednesday night on the symbolism of water in the Christian journey, led by Gene Hoshier, Glenn Strauss, and Andrew Moyes, and myself. My topic was living water in global eye care. And so really, I started to say, what does God have compassion for? Who does God have compassion? Because we need to think about who God has compassion. We know that God has a particular bent for the poor and the needy and the fatherless, the widows and the orphans. And so as we look at the gospel, that's where we want to also focus. And the other thing I said is, what's your calling? What do you want to be when you grow up? Well, here I am. What is your calling? And think back about your original calling. Think about using your God-given skills. How do you use those? And in particular, we talked about ophthalmology as your mission. And your talents, do they line up with ophthalmology? There are some ophthalmologists that are very talented in other areas, and they may be mission in carpentry and other things. And some of us really feel that ophthalmology is our calling for certain missions. So one of my partners is very passionate about Bible quizzing. And he's led teams to Bible quizzing and taught many, many kids to memorize the Bible. Another partner is passionate about writing science fiction, Christian science fiction, and he dedicates a couple days a week to writing Christian science fiction. That's thinking a little outside the box, but the point is ophthalmology your mission, or is there some other things that really sinks your talents and where you feel? So what did we see in the gospel? We need to use whatever gift we receive to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace. So what is living water? Well, the Samaritan woman asked Jesus, and Jesus said, everyone who drinks the water will be thirsty, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. The water I give them will become the spring of water welling up to eternal life. So my question for you is, what are your unique talents and skills within ophthalmology, and how does God want to use them? And I'll extend that to ophthalmology agencies and industry and missions. And so how does God call us to be living water in global eye care? So here's what I said. I believe that being living water is the perfect intersection between your calling from God, being a Christian ophthalmologist, and your God-given talents and God-developed skills, and bringing those to the office, to the world, and to your home. And I'm going to extend that a little bit more and say that that applies just as well to the ophthalmic industry people, using your skills and your calling for purposes at the office and globally. So my suggestion is all Christian ophthalmologists, all Christian in ophthalmic industry and in mission agencies should view their practice and their work as mission. And all Christian ophthalmologists and ophthalmic industry fellowship folks should and can be missionaries. So is God using eye care providers around the world as living water? This is my last point that I made. And we said, here's some missionaries you probably know: John Cropsey, Ben Roberts, Wendy Hoffman, Nathan Hinson, John Kempen, Scott Lawrence, John O'Pons, and Tim Fincher. But I've had a passion. There are so many missionaries. God is working in so many great ways that, our view is like this. And it's nice when we widen it just a little bit. And so here's some missionaries you may not know. Do you know Pete Noe in Belgium? A Belgian ophthalmologist serving in Rwanda for many years and just built a hospital. How about George Shule, who's in Tenwick with Ben Roberts? How about Brian Zerby, who's been serving in Tajikistan and Afghanistan full time? Anybody know him? One. How about Kevin Kummerfeld from California, also serving in Tajikistan with full-time missionary? How about Joyce and Henry Samato that are in the Congo serving in God's name? We'll see if I'm still connected. If not, we'll...
Hello, I'm Pete Noe. I'm a Belgian ophthalmologist. I'm working in Rwanda since 2008. I started this hospital and I work in this hospital with a Christian motivation. So in the end, it's to show the love of God for all the people, and certainly for people with eye diseases and blindness.
Hi, my name is George Schule. I'm a consultant ophthalmologist at Tenwick Hospital. My wife and me came as mission doctors from Germany in 2017. It's a great blessing to be here and see God at work in Tenwick. It's a great pleasure to work with this international team and also Dr. Ben Roberts, whom you all know.
Hello, Christian Ophthalmology Society community. I'm Brian Zerby, an ophthalmologist serving in Tajikistan since 2008. We opened a clinic, Solim Med, in 2011. I work with a partner, Kevin Kummerfeld, also a Christian ophthalmologist from the United States. We have 2 full-time Tajik ophthalmologists and a total staff of about 20 people.
Bonjour.
Mbote.
Hello from Congo.
We are a medical missionary family, and we are passionate about helping people see, both physically and spiritually.
And our calling comes from Luke 10:9, which says, "Heal the sick and tell them the kingdom of God is near you."
In 2012, the Samutus uprooted their 3 children, then aged 6, 3 and 1, from the comfort and security of their lives in the UK to move to Imfondo in isolated northern Congo to pioneer the area's first eye surgical centre.
Time and again, we have seen God use medicine as a vehicle to bring people to Him.
And we have seen God make a way where there seems to be no way. God has been faithful every time.
Yes, and we can be here telling you the story all day. If you want to find out more, please get in touch.
and join us on this most exciting journey. We sure need your help. Thank you very much.
I just am blessed as I meet and reach out and see how God's working in ways that we don't know. So how can we share the living water of Jesus in our settings? So what does sharing living water in global eye care look like around places that we are all from here? You may see your center listed here. And how does that look like at Bascom Palmer, at Bishop Eye Center, Empire Eye, Oregon Health, Tally River Associates, Caroline Associates, where you're from. So let's talk about models of mission and how to get involved. I've identified 7 different models, and there's many folks that I could represent here. So please keep in mind there's so many ophthalmologists, as you saw, that are involved. Ophthalmologists really, we have a special calling because there's such a need in the world. But anyhow, so the first model is pretty traditional model of this short-term mission. But I want to just tell you about a few doctors that are involved in special ways. Dr. Dan Siapko, he serves around the globe every year, and he travels with his wife and kids. He's an expert in M6. He's very good at the Blumenthal anterior chamber maintainer. Just got back from Niger with Vision Outreach. Jason Ling's a young ophthalmologist. This guy has traveled to North Korea. He's been in northern India working with Jacob Prabhakar so they can do 50 cases an hour between the two of them. He goes to Guatemala regularly and Tanzania. And so this guy's a phenomenal young ophthalmologist. Well, there are ophthalmologists that are involved throughout their practices. Can you be a solo practitioner and do missions? Dr. Mark Eaton shows that you do. He does 3 to 4 mission trips per year through Heaven in Sight missions. He's been to 20 nations, and he's got a neat video on his website there if you want to watch that. Dr. Dan Gold, another solo practitioner, he only goes to dangerous sites, so don't go with him unless you've got your bootstraps on. That's not totally true, but Bob Rice has been faithful, going yearly with MMI. He's developed a mission manual for ophthalmologists that I'm going to post on that I got back in 2013. I'll post it on our website so that you can read that. And I want to also highlight Dr. Mark Chakowski. He travels with his wife Jan, and he's a solo practitioner. He told me 2 days ago, he says he closes his office for 2 times a year. Now he's retired now, but he did this throughout his practice, and he lives below his means to close his office 2 weeks, twice a year. So 4 weeks he closed his office, and he said, God always blessed. I had more work than I could handle when I was back. My office always thrived. He spent years going to Tanzania, Lighthouse for Christ in Kenya, Nigeria, Zambia, and he's worked with Jeremy Agri in the Ivory Coast, and he's been 9 times to the Bahamas just in the last 4 or 5 years. A committed short-term mission who's really investing in people and skill sets. So let's talk briefly about full-time missionaries. We have examples like Ben Roberts, a retinal specialist who's been full-time since training in Kenya and Tenwick. We got John Cropsey, which most of us know, an amazing man who's leading an effort in Burundi in a very tenuous time there in Burundi. We got people like Wendy Hoffman serving as a career missionary in Bangalo, and she's been very present in our society. We have Nathan Hinson, one of our board members now, serving as a career, and he started an amazing LASIK and eczema and femto and all these things in Cusco, and he's bonding together with the local ophthalmologists and sharing the gospel and sharing and helping them learn and helping them do well, not competing as much as extending his arm to them. We got Tim Fincher and Sean Grinovich, who are both serving as career missionaries in the United Arab Emirates. I highlighted already Brian Zerby. John Opans, many of us know and love, who is a CBM missionary in the new Eswatini, not in Swaziland. You got to say Eswatini now. And I want to highlight Dr. Lowell Guess. Turned 98 in July, and he served since the early 50s at the Kissy UMC Eye Clinic in Freetown. Here's a picture. He turned 98, and a week or 2 later, he left with his 2 granddaughters. One, Deb Rivstad, who's an ophthalmologist. You have 3 generations of ophthalmologists. His son, Tim, is the father of both of them. Deb and Sarah went to Sierra Leone to dedicate the Lowell and Ruth Guess Eye Hospital in Kissy, Freetown. And he just got back, and he seems to be doing quite well. Lowell Guess he went there right during the peak of Ebola. And there's Deb. I'm sorry, Deb. You want to stand so people can chat with you about Lowell after the meeting if you want. Deb's here. So get this, he gets to the Ebola-stricken. This is during January a few years ago when he was only 94 or something like that, or 95. He gets there, and you can't touch anybody. You go to church and it's like a 2-hour service. You have to have like a gown on and everything. You can't touch. It's quite amazing, his stories. But anyhow, he discovers there's uveitis in those that survived Ebola. So he gets Emery and Dr. Stephen Ye. Is Stephen here? Anyhow, he gets him involved, and they're making all sorts of gains on learning about Ebola with that. So anyhow, so let's talk about early career missions. Early career missions is certainly an option. These are people who've done this. Dave Brown, my partner, he practiced for 2 years in Michigan, and then he decided to go to Tenwick, and he was the first ophthalmologist in Tenwick, and he learned manual small incision from a nurse there, Sam Powdrell, for those of you who know. And then he did a master's at the London School with Alan Foster. Dan Graydon is somebody I look up to a lot. He was Dr. Brown's idol because he was such a superstar in his surgical techniques. He could do about anything you wanted, and he was at Kikuyu there for 10 years. He was really a master surgeon. Dr. Graydon, I believe, is here as well, right? Was here. Good. There's Dr. Graydon. Currently living in Oregon and still quite frequently goes back to Africa. Dr. Tim Keatsman was a missionary kid in Pakistan. His dad was an ophthalmologist, and he went back to this very remote area of Pakistan and served for 10 years before he came and did a neurofellowship in his Wheaton. Here's a hero of mine, Dr. Richard Lewis, who practiced general medicine for 2 years, went to Afghanistan and said, I need to become an ophthalmologist. Went back to Afghanistan. I met him at a COS meeting in Cleveland, and I was sitting there. I said, so have you been there like during the war? He goes, which war? Like there's continuous war there, and this is before the U.S. invasion and U.S. involvement. But he served alongside the optometrist that we featured in Tom Little, who lost his life in Afghanistan. Here's John Clements, an example. And I'm not sure if he went. I wanted to highlight the Samaritan's Purse Fellowship, which is a 2-year program for residents who are just starting and need some support. But he served in Angola for 2 years with his family. So the World Medical Mission post-residency program will sponsor you and also pay your loans. And here's their group. So mid-career missions. Let's talk about Devin Harrison, who is a corneal specialist, a professor at University of Washington. He told me yesterday on the sidewalk, he said, Stan, he said, when I was a professor, I had to think, is this what I want to do, or do I want to be focused on missions? And he and his family moved to Nigeria and surprised all of the faculty there to move to Nigeria. Devin has a great testimony, and he's back practicing in Washington in a solo practice. Dr. Michael Seward, a corneal surgeon, came to our practice, said, I want to practice for 5 years and I want to leave and go to CBM. I want to be a missionary ophthalmologist. That's in the middle of his practice, and he went and he served in Zambia for 7 years between Zambia and Papua New Guinea. Dr. Scott Lawrence is someone we know and love who, mid-career decides to move to Ethiopia to develop and work with programs. And Ethiopia is going gangbusters. A meeting I went to this 3 days ago said there are 100 residents in Ethiopia now. 100 residents. And that's a gigantic change because of partnership, people like Scott Lawrence and others that have been helping. John Kempen, of course, is here as well, and John is a uveitis specialist that moved together and had a vision and dream with Scott. In the middle of his career, decided to move. And then I want to feature late career missions. So Dr. Glenn Strauss, I got to eat supper with him 2-3 days ago on Friday, and he left his practice at age 51 to serve full-time on the Mercy Ship. Now, he told me, he said, listen, he said, when I was in practice early, we wanted to be able to dedicate time to God. And he said, so we lived on half of our salary, and I gave the rest of it to an investment manager to grow it so we would be able to serve as we got older. So he lived under his means, and that's a lifestyle choice. So he's there now. Glenn is 65. He's been serving for 15 years, and he's been amazing, as most of us know. Dr. Bert Bowden's also one of my heroes that I mentioned, and he's been involved throughout teaching in Dominican and Azerbaijan, China, and he was an oculoplastic specialist that shows up in an M6 course and says, I've got to learn M6. And now he's retired, and he also sacrificed many things to be full-time missions. He sold his building because it was too high of rent. And he started working for Delta Airlines, throwing bags so he could have cheaper flights. And so he still has flights anywhere in the world. I want to tell you about Dr. Doug Perry. Doug Perry stopped early and to serve in El Progreso, Honduras. And he worked with a young buck named Diego Mejia, who trained in Guatemala. Is Diego still here? All right. and Doug dedicated the last few years of his life to missions there and developed a sarcoma in, I'm not sure if it was 2009 or 10, somewhere in that range, and passed, but serving. And Maxine, his wife, continues the efforts in Honduras. And here's a clinic now named Centro de la Vision. This is a centro dedicated to Dr. Doug Perry in San Pedro Sula, and that's run by Diego, of course. So local missions, I want to talk about Dr. Robert Rice. This is another model. He started Eye Care San Antonio in 1993. Look at their statistics, how many people they've done surgery on, and glasses, and people who have received medical care. And their mission statement states, we're improving lives by providing complete eye care, including glasses, exam, etc., etc. Vision statement, we are a community that shares the love of Christ and provides access to compassionate, quality eye care to all. Christ-centered values, best medical practice, excellence. I wanted to highlight a couple that's an amazing couple, Craig and Amy Fowler. And Craig and Amy have opened their lake home to the entire medical school class in UNC or Campbell. And they have a ministry there every year. And I saw Craig just a couple days ago, and he says, oh yeah, he says, well, that's not their only ministry. They're involved, and he pulled this right out. He has it right ready. This is his triangle and triangle of whatever. Let's see, I'll read it here. The TCMDA. It's their organization for CMDA, Triangle CMDA fundraiser, and different things like that. So they have events going around, and so I'm proud of that. That's certainly mission. And so I wanted to highlight one other local mission, and that's what's going on in Oklahoma City with the Ministries of Jesus. This was an outreach of the church that had a separate 501c3. They had multiple medical specials, Christian counseling. They only see those without insurance or means to pay. Brad just told me he retired. But he said they operate under Luke 4:18-19, which was one of the founding verses for the COS, which I did not know that. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. So here's the ministries of Jesus. And the last model is a model of adopting, supporting missions, not necessarily going, but teaching. Dr. David Cook's a good example. He's a busy phacosurgeon. He hated M6. He says, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But he's gotten in and supported Dr. Diego for many years. He enables other surgeons to go. He brought Diego to make sure he's getting meetings and books and things like that. And so that's an example. Kevin Barber is a physician doing this as well, and I think as well Daniel Chang is doing this. So these are ways to support missions. Now, Dr. Diego Mejia, who we know, he's been a benefactor for many years, but now he's giving back. He's giving back his Camp Diego, and he's taking care of poor patients. So he really has a supportive measure. One person I'd like to highlight is somebody who doesn't toot his horn very much, Dr. James Guzik. And he's traveled extensively throughout the world, Ghana, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Ethiopia. And he had a burden for this young ophthalmologist who's trying to serve the poor but had no money and couldn't afford. So Dr. Guzik goes around and says, we're going to pay your salary from the US. And he and maybe a few others or not, I'm not sure, support Dr. Samuel, who's in Ethiopia. So that's our models, our 7 models. You can see there's lots of ways to be involved in mission. Let's talk about the seasons. Is fall your favorite season? Boy, in Michigan, that's our favorite season. But the whole thing about seasons is there are seasons in your life where you need to pull back, where you can't be involved. Maybe even in your local missions, you got crisis, you have other things going on, you're busy. That's real. And there's seasons, and I tell young ophthalmologists that all the time. This may not be the season for you to be going or to extend extra time and whatnot. You may be in winter, right now, and that's okay. But there's seasons in life, and we know that. So let's talk briefly about the risks and benefits. What are the benefits? Well, I don't want to focus too much on this, but it's an amazing way to see the world and change people's lives. Broaden your surgical skills. You become a much broader surgeon for certain, and you have lifelong impact on your youth and family. But the risks are really out there. There's sacrifice, risking illness, comfort, strange foods, safety. Devin Harrison was robbed at gunpoint in Nigeria, and you may risk your life. You're going to risk your vacation time if you go somewhere, and you may not be able to do vacation. my wife asks me every now and then, are we going to go on vacation? You risk, really, this is expensive. You're not going to earn the same. You're going to earn less. And that's a thing you need to think through, because you may sacrifice your 401k if you're a missionary full time, and God will provide. The most impressive lecture that I've heard is on the COS website about the risks, benefits, alternatives, and complications of missionary ophthalmology by Rich Lewis. He gave this in Homestead, Virginia in 2011. If you want to hear it, our recording screwed up, but we re-recorded it later at home, and it's a powerful, powerful message about God working in his life in Afghanistan. So look on that on the archives, and you look up Rich Lewis or RBAC or something like that. So my story, how does a full partner go for long-term mission? Well, I'll just try to be brief. I think we're running long here, but I started with mission trips as my dad was an oncologist, and we did mission trips. And I was able to go with my brother and deliver babies while everybody else was learning about it as a second-year medical student. So I started getting a passion, but I was inspired by an ophthalmologist that I met from Terre Haute, Indiana, Dr. Donald Yates, and his wife Madonna wrote $1 Million Vacations from MMI, if you know that. Don died a number of years ago, but he served his entire career. And I did not think about going into ophthalmology until I met this man. So he was someone. So as we trained, we had an idea to serve in Appalachia, and we formed a group of like-minded people, a little bit like the Cropsey's done in Burundi, and to move to Appalachia together as a community. And so that was my first practice, was in Appalachia, and it was very fulfilling. I actually found about that job at the AAO by a Christian ophthalmologist from the COS, which I had never heard of, and he said, here's a letter from a doctor in Appalachia looking for a partner. And it turned out where my roommate from college lived, and I had been there one time, and so we went to Harlan, Kentucky. So now when I was starting practice there, I had a very close friend who was an optometrist living as a missionary in Haiti, and he called and asked me to come, and he said, there's all these bilateral blind patients. I need you to come down and help. I looked at my wife, and she said, there is no way you're going. And I said, she knew and loved these people too. I said, honey, this is Phil Raber. And his wife Miriam is a dentist, and he's an optometrist. He can't do surgery. You are not going. Our child is 2. And there's macaroni all over the floor. A few years later, I joined Great Lakes Eye Care. Dave Brown exits and goes to Tenwick Hospital for 2 years. Comes back, starts Vision Outreach International, 2010. Well, what's Vision Outreach? Started off like a lot of little mission groups, just doing missions 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year. Well, Dave Brown and Tom Fisher went all over the world. Did Stan Pletcher go? No. I was not allowed to go. It was not the season in my life. In fact, my wife says, we're not going unless we go as a family. That model didn't work for us. So we went as a family to Guatemala. We went and lived above Diego for a couple weeks. Taught him plastics, and he lost it all. Right? No, we were doing phaco, we had fun. Really my message was short-term missions did not work really well for me to go and leave and come back to my family when we had young kids. So we had to go and take a 2-year-old for us for making that work. So what did I do? I sulked in my study, and I decided to start Christian Eye Network because I could do that at night. And that was our online portal to connect people with jobs and missions and ministry in 2006. And then I started Mission Eyes Network, which is an online portal for mission equipment information and trip information. And that's something I could do till 1 and 2 in the morning when I had energy. My kids had gone to bed. And so I could be a dad plus do that. And of course that kind of changed into Global Sight Alliance. But that was one of the ways. And in 2004, Dave Brown asked me, he says, you know Spanish. He says, I need you to come to San Lorenzo with me, Ecuador. So my wife gave me permission for this one mission trip. And this is not a safe place to bring your 2-year-old. But I went, learned M6 that trip. And as I got home, I did this trip twice, in 2004 and 2006. I didn't always have a happy wife when I came home because she had been overworked. She was by herself. It didn't work for my family like some families. And she says, you know what? You're not going by yourself anymore. We're going as a family. I said, this is not a safe place. She says, I don't care. So there we are, 2008. We took 3 weeks off of Great Lakes Eye Care, and we went to San Lorenzo as a family. I said, we're not going to go just to San Lorenzo. We got to go to Shell, because I know that place you'll love. And so we went to Shell for a couple weeks, and here we are in Baños that time. And then the next year, we formed a group to go to San Lorenzo. My whole family went with us. We took a group, and this was the life-changing year where God really spoke hard to us. It was in 2009. I took Kurt Heitman. That's a story in itself of how Kurt couldn't get there but got there, and God changed lives there. In the trip, there was a missionary from HCJB, from the mission hospital in Shell, that was one of my partners supported. And he said, I need to talk to you about recruiting an ophthalmologist for Shell Hospital. And we needed a full-time ophthalmologist there. And I said, well, that's interesting. I'll be able to find you that in a heartbeat. There's so many families that want to go, and this is a safe place for families. I knew that because we had spent time there. And I said, I'll find you somebody. It won't be our family. Went home. My wife looked up at me and she said, why wouldn't we go? I said, honey, there is no way we can go. I can tell you 5 reasons why we can't go. Number 1, what would my practice say? I'm a full partner. Number 2, our kids are too old. They're not going to want to go. Number 3, we still own our last home that we haven't sold. Number 4, Christian Eye Network is still in the red and needs support. Number 5, our marriage is still needing work. How many barriers do you need? Well, we sat and prayed and thought about that. And this is the time where you sometimes are tempted to say, God, if you take all those barriers away, we'll go, right? Open these doors, we're going to go. Well, that wasn't really easy. And we decided, faith is not about God opening all the doors and making it so easy to know always. The only barrier that we tipped before we decided was our oldest son, who was in 10th grade, said, first no, then yes, I'll go. After his permission, we didn't actually get the permission of our practice, nor the rest of these things, and we said, God, you're going to have to deal with those. So we went to Dr. Cook. Dave, we're thinking about leaving. And Dave looked at me and went, wheels turning. 15 seconds later, okay, I've got it figured out. I can get rid of all my pseudophakic patients and take care of your cataract patients. I've got it figured out. And anyhow, that's a longer story, but God provided, and we actually found someone to come and fill in my oculoplastics general practice, lived in my house, and so God took care. So we went to Ecuador, and here is my youngest daughter in front of Los Andes del Oriente. This is our view in the morning of the local volcano spewing a little. And here's our favorite supper place where we could eat for $12 for 6 of us. Hamburger, fry, and drink included. I had actually 2 techs that were very faithful. These are techs that came from the United States from Great Lakes Eye Care. Both fluent in Spanish, both Mexican. And one came for 2 years and the other came for 1 year. So anyhow, we had an amazing experience, and I won't go into that, but we introduced phaco and whatnot, and accomplished a lot in 2 years, and found an ophthalmologist, got trained at Juan Baez Center as well. So after that, I really have spent my time doing some short-term. Again, it doesn't work real well for me to go short-term, but I still do that. My wife allows me. It's not always as smooth, but right now in this season I've been going. This was actually while we were there. I trained Matt McCauley and another doctor. Here's Brian Huff and Jeff Taylor on their trip to San Lorenzo. I've taken Muslims, and I've taken a Jewish doctor with me. This is Dr. Ricardo, who was I can't remember where he's from actually. Here's a very good corneal surgeon trained by Dr. Rousey, John Williams, and Abet, who's our faithful helper assistant. So after that, really after getting back, I've gotten more immersed in helping grow the support of full-time missionaries through the COS. And of course, I've gotten a little stuck into the equipment mode as well. But the key lessons that I've learned really from Ecuador, I wanted to bring out, just some of the things I learned. Serving outside of your comfort zone helps God reach us better. Don't put God in a box. This is a view we saw when we're driving over the mountain. We put God in our box trying to understand Him, but He is so huge, omnipotent, and omnipresent, infinite. He's not a human. And God is present throughout the world, so let's not put Him. He wants to seek us. God really desires dependence on Him, and I think that's, for those of us that have done full-time missions, we lose control. We all love control, but we lose control of our culture and our language. And what does God desire? He really desires us to be faithful, as we've been talking about, and being with Him as a branch. So God calls us out of our boat. How do you hear God's call? Does God call you overseas? Are you willing to step outside your boat? So I'll go through this fairly quickly. The principles: is there a spot for you? Are your skills needed? How do you skin that cat? Can you make a difference? Well, mosquitoes do make a difference, and they're pretty small. Questions for you: what are your intentions? Where do you feel called? Are the skills there that needed complementary to my skills complementary to their needs? Do I need to upgrade my skill set or language? And what investment do I need to make a difference? What are the needs in my local community? And if our office isn't helping the needs locally, why would I help globally? Some of the problems with missions: really, people have reinvented the wheel. We duplicate. We have a go and do mentality. We have difficult cases in less than ideal conditions and equipment. And we have difficulty finding information on what's needed and things like that. The old face, the traditional going, doing. The new face of mission: going, teaching, supporting, connecting. So in a summary slide, the changing face of missions, there's many things, as we know: political environments, the role of the internet, cell phones, the ease of travel. The biggest thing that we've noticed is there's more ophthalmologists that are qualified in all these places, and we need to connect with them, the national surgeons, and not threaten them. The ministries of health may be less in favor. There's been a lot of precedents set, some bad surgeries. There's a lot of things that are changing. So how do you find your niche? Is that you? Number 2 or number 3 there? So I put these lists together. Find an agency or organization that you respect. You want to study the country you're going to, language, politics, geography. You want to prepare yourself for the challenges. You need to watch videos. You need to go to teaching courses. You need to know the appropriate technology, read about diseases, and go with someone skilled. And then the last, repeat visits to support a clinic. So repeat visits, I'll repeat that. Repeat visits, going back to the same place, is building relationships and a long-term commitment with that area, studying the long-term issues there. And then last, commitment to skills transfer. So you're teaching, you're training people, responding to the local needs. So I put that as a summary. If you can see, there's a little bit of an abbreviation, ASCRS. And so everybody's favorite organization. Oh, whoops. Let's get that right. All right. And really, but we're not at ASCRS, so I thought, well, we better talk about the AAO. And what does the AAO say? The AAO says, go, right? But really, this is the COS meeting. So I thought, let's think of a mnemonic for the COS. We're Christ called and directed. We're open to God's leading. And we're using the seasons that He's prepared for us. So my principles for missions: really, short-term missions are a blessing. Those impacted may not be who you guess. And certainly we know you receive more than you give. One of the biggest gifts you receive is a perspective on life. More impacts when returning to the same spot. Flexibility is the key. Long-term impact is the greatest with investment. And short-term missions is fertile ground for God working on you. So last, I'll finish with the story of Jonah. Does anybody know Jonah? The story of Jonah, a very famous Bible story. What does that have to do with our mission? Well, our church studied Jonah, and I like Jonah because it was short. I could read it 4 or 5 chapters and you're done. And Jonah is a great book. This is, of course, our kids' view of Jonah. But Jonah, I thought, was about this guy who didn't listen to God, and God turned him around and says, hey, listen, you need to listen to me. And he threw him into the belly of a whale. It took all this to get him to listen. So I thought it was about this disobedient servant who finally came around. That's not what Jonah is about. When you really read Jonah, you keep going. Once Jonah finally went to Nineveh, he gave a 5-word sermon, and this evil village of a couple, 100,000 people, everybody doing bad, all of a sudden turned toward God. And in the last chapter, Jonah's sitting down sulking and going, this ain't fair. What's going on? I mean, God's blessing these people who are not good. And really the story of Jonah is about God's grace. God giving grace as amazing grace, and showing us that he's giving mercy to people that we're calling to serve. So I'm going to finish with this question: how are Christian eye missions different from all the others? Because there's a lot of ophthalmologists. This is a sort of a in thing now, and you see many ophthalmologists involved internationally. Well, the last thing is from our church as well. Our new slogan is know, be, do together. And I've been inspired by this. I thought this might be really good to challenge us. Know Jesus intimately. Be transformed by the Spirit. And this applies to us as we do mission with God. So if we know Jesus intimately and we're transformed, then we're going to do our mission in the right character. Our summary: the need for eye care is gigantic. Most ophthalmologists want to serve internationally, but where's God calling you, international or local? How will you serve as a Christian ophthalmologist or Christian in industry differently due to your faith? Who's your role model? Who's your mentor? I'll end on a final quote that's one of my favorite quotes. We face a humanity too precious to neglect. We know a remedy too wonderful to withhold. We have a Savior too glorious to hide. This is an adventure too thrilling to miss. Dr. Guest started that in his first book, Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory. Maybe that's not his first book, but one of his books. And anyhow, he's wonderful. It's nice to hear him say that, and it's something that he repeats. And so, thank you very much. There's my email if you have any questions. And I'm thrilled and honored to be here in front of so many people who I respect and have tried to emulate many of you. So thank you guys for your role models. And think about being involved in our mentor program, which through the COS, where we have young ophthalmologists looking for advice and looking for help. So thank you very much.